Alan Quinlan is with us. Good morning to you, Alan. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
Yeah, very good. You've got the red on. You must have been happy with the second half performance.
Yeah, I tell you, there was an air of relief around Thomond Park on Saturday night. First half wasn't good, and Munster got 4 tries forward, dominated tries in the second half, and but frustrating in the sense, I'd say, for the people that were there. There was kind of an eerie silence, particularly leading up to half time. Then Jack O'Donoghue scored that try, and it was totally different. Peter O'Mahony stopped a certain try for Libbok that would have made it 19-0 against the Stormers, which was remarkable, really. I was commentating on the game, and I thought the Stormers were fantastic. And it's difficult at times when you're on commentary how to process it really, really quickly, because you're trying to focus on the next thing all the time. But looking back at the game, Munster were poor, and really poor in that first half, and they struggled to find answers to what the Stormers were doing.
There's a lot of people who are fairly ambivalent about the new league and what it means and the long term, but it's matches like this that do seesaw, where you see some really good, not just bad performance from Munster in the first half. We've got to give Stormers some credit as well, that actually sucks people in and goes, well, actually this is going to be pretty interesting. If the quality of fare is a top quality South African team hammering Munster at home for 20-25 minutes, then people are going to tune in, particularly because the Munster comeback was so spectacular as well.
Well, it's good in a sense that we've only had one win from 8 games from the first 2 rounds with the South Africans, and that was the Lions against Zebra. We want them to be competitive. We want them to ask questions, and maybe it's been a bit unfair. It's very early in the season for Munster, given the match practice and sharpness and fitness and all that kind of stuff. The South African teams, I thought they'd hit the ground running better because they're all off the back of Currie Cups. They've played a lot of games together in the last number of weeks without their internationals, and they've been largely the same groups who've played from in the Currie Cup, and we want them to be competitive for sure. And when teams go and play them in South Africa, it's going to be much more difficult, and maybe it's a mental thing for them to get up to speed, being away from home for a long period. They're here for a block of 3 or 4 weeks, all the South African teams. But I just thought what happened in Thomond Park on the other night was, you have to give credit to the Stormers. I thought they were fantastic. Their execution, their passing, their ambition to run with the ball. Their fly half, Libbok, who relatively unknown player. He was sensational. He's a running fly half, and they caused Munster a lot of problems. Munster couldn't get over the gain line, and then they made mistakes themselves and kind of handed the ball back to the Stormers. So if you do that on a good night against any team, their backs are to the wall, and I suppose they went to Thomond Park with an ambition to try and play, and those passes started to stick, and suddenly you have that situation where you've got to react and try and change things. At no stage did I think Munster were not going to turn it around, but at 90, if it was 19-0, it could have been a lot trickier for them.
Well, why did Munster turn the tide then, or maybe more to the point, how come the Stormers stopped cutting through Munster like a knife through hot butter?
Well, Munster sorted out their possession game, which it's one of their strengths. They've had plenty of critics and criticisms in the last number of years, but look, their set piece is normally good, their forward play is normally good. They started to get some gain line success. The ball was quicker for Craig Casey. They were able to play in the right areas. And they probably just decided to do the simple things in that second half and grind out a result. The Stormers captain Murat was sin bin just after half time, and I think that was probably a significant period where Munster scored 2 tries, and they were forward tries, mauls, pick and goes, and I suppose when that's happening, if you're a player out in the field it's probably not pretty on the eye, and maybe not what the fans wanted to see, and it's a real contrast probably from the week before for the Sharks, where Simon Zebra's try at the end is probably as good a try as Munster have scored in years in for themselves. The accuracy and the passing of that last try last week, and So I suppose people, and look, there's certain criticism going to be leveled at him about the quality in attack and all that kind of stuff. That's where the question marks are. And if you don't get that in a game like this, then people are kind of leaving the stadium thinking, we want to see more attack. But they did adapt, and I know Johan van Graan spoke about it afterwards, and you're going to have games like that, but there still is question marks, of course, around the attack and the realignment and stuff like that. But they did what they had to do, and as I said, if I was a player out there, win the game, turn it around, and sometimes that's the simple way. So by holding on to possession and just being a bit more aggressive and accurate at the breakdown, and it was working for him, so they kept going at that.
It was interesting when RG Snyman came on, just the massive roar that erupts around the stadium when he comes on, and then his try. It's almost like a massive tight end playing American football coming up against juvenile players. Nobody can bring him down one-handed. And again, just this massive kind of moment of, I don't know, energy that goes through Thomond Park. It looked like anyway, Alan. I was watching it on TV.
It was.
Just that sort of player. That's the sort of player that can completely change a game and is a total wild card for any opposition.
Yeah, it was brilliant. He's obviously had a really difficult time getting injured in that first game against Leinster, and he's a superstar player. And we've seen only just snippets of him in the last 2 weeks, which is great to see. But he's going to be vital when you come to the big European games or the big knockout games at the end of the season. He could be a game changer. And if they get a full team on the field, it's an if they get all their players fit. Well, you think with Snyman in the pack, he can make a real difference to him. Will he be the difference between them winning a trophy or not? Who knows? Will the attack or the accuracy be the difference? It needs to get better for sure. I think they know that themselves. And it's too early to be kind of too critical of them. And they know themselves on Saturday night. It was a terrible first half from them. They allowed the Stormers play, and that's probably the frustrating thing. And it's a lesson learned. They're away to Scarlets next week, and they have a block of games to try and reintegrate players. But having Snyman back in the group could be massive for them. They'll be hoping that Jacques Nienaber doesn't bring him into the November internationals, which is probably likely that he will. But come December, I think, for those big European games, they're away to Wasps, home to Cass. If you deal in the Snyman, Farrell in the team, those guys will make a difference, and they're top quality players.
Just one other one on Munster for me anyway, Alan. The Ben Healy substitution, I mean, he kicked with conviction when he came on. Carberry maybe didn't have his best day. Are we going to get to a stage this season where this becomes a real toss of a coin of a decision where Healy can become out half number one for Johan van Graan?
I don't know. I think you've got to... I said this in the commentary the other night. Joey Carberry, at the moment, just looks a little bit sheepish and a little bit someone trying to get up to speed and just get his confidence back and that zip back. It's tricky and he'll be frustrated with the first half when his forward pack probably were making mistakes and errors, and they didn't hold on to the ball for long enough for giving him a platform. He's a wonderful player. The kicking, and I said this, the kicking is something that it's just for him personally. It wasn't going to be the difference in the end of winning and losing the game, but some of the strikes weren't great. And you'd love to see a fella like that just for his own confidence, striking the ball really well and getting all those kicks. But he just doesn't look right at the moment. But he needs more matches, and you've got to back Joey Carberry. He's a wonderful player, and I think I really hope he has a big season, but just as a tiny little bit of that spark and that natural ability that we're not seeing at the moment. But it's only 2 games in on, it's very, very early days. And but having Ben Healy as an option, he's kind of like your quarterback in the NFL. If you get him on the field and you end up moving Carberry somewhere else because of his quality or taking him off, you get a penalty late on in the tight game from anywhere around the halfway line or even further out. You think Ben Healy is an incredible option to get the kick. There was a penalty before the one he kicked the other night was outside the halfway line, and he was he was wanting to kick it, and then Munster decided to go down the touchline. But it's a wonderful option to have.
It helps to have a big boot on the pitch, all right. Connacht, in many ways, was the performance of the weekend from the Irish provinces.
It was, yeah. They were brilliant. They weathered the storm in all fronts. The weather was terrible in the sports ground the other night, and they conceded a try very early on, but really adapted, put in a super performance. I thought they were. The Bulls were. Jake White was blaming the weather afterwards and interpretations from referees and all that kind of stuff, but it was a very disappointing performance from the Bulls, and they seemed to be shell-shocked. Disrespected Connacht a little bit. He said he didn't know much about them, that they were a poor relation of Irish rugby, and that the good players from Ireland, head west, and they have similar situations in South Africa. Whether there's some truth in that, we do see that player movements around Ireland where players are not getting contracts in Leinster or Munster, and they head to Connacht and they do very well for themselves. But it probably fired Connacht up a little bit, and they put in a brilliant performance. It was certainly the best performance from an Irish province at the weekend, and in terrible conditions, and to get a bonus point in the end. I thought Tom Farrell's try was just epitomised what they're trying to do. It was a great score. Off a scrum, taken right to the line, and he sides through a gap. You could argue it's poor defence from the Bulls, but it was a brilliant, brilliant score. And Mac Hansen's try, then that was a piece of individual brilliance, a wonderful score. So they got some great tries there, and they played really well, and deserve a lot of credit for that performance Friday night, particularly what happened them the week before away to Cardiff.
The Jake White comments are interesting. Like, there is blaming the conditions, and then there is his analysis of it. He said the wind was pumping and the rain came down. When you lose a toss here, it really becomes like cricket. You struggle to get up the hill. The ground is sloped that way, and it's also the direction the wind comes from. Is that a big deal? Like, we often hear about the wind and the rain, but the slope in the sports ground as well, Quinny, is that a big thing?
Well, I've played there many times, and I'm not sure what hill he's talking about. Because there's no obvious hill there. You feel that in some grounds around Europe when you play, that there's a bit of an advantage playing one way, that there's a slight elevation, or maybe the crowd or the wind blows a certain way. It's been difficult playing both ways at times when the weather is bad in the sports ground, but it probably shows that they didn't respect Connacht. They didn't respect what they were facing and the possible conditions. And, they were sloppy, and for a big, massive physical side, Connacht really kind of got amongst them. Papali'i obviously is very strong. Fafita coming off is going to give Connacht extra power and physicality this year. But I just thought that they were accurate. They put pace and tempo to the game, and the Bulls just couldn't live with that. So Jake White is always making some sort of excuses, and I think he should look within. And certainly they disrespected Connacht, I think, and they thought they were probably going to turn up and just control the game with their strength.
Hopefully now Connacht can put a couple of performances back to back, because the comments from Andy Friend after the first game was that the coaching ticket was very confident that the work that they were doing would pay off. It's great to see it pay off so quickly. Now they just need some consistency, and I know there was some turnover in the backroom team there as well, so that might feed into the fact that there are new things being worked on, and there's some new signings as well. So fingers crossed that the arrow pointing up continues for Connacht. Let's talk about Leinster. So Leinster went to Dragons and won 7-6. One of those kind of grim battles of the will. The transformation of Cian Healy from one side of the scrum to the other, from loose head to tight head, was not something I'd heard anything talked about over the last couple of years. Wasn't a suggestion that I'd seen many people speak about. Everybody had kind of kept an eye on Porter's transformation from one side of the scrum to the other, and now back. And maybe it makes perfect sense for somebody at Healy's age to do this. I haven't seen it happen for 34-year-olds to move, particularly somebody with 100 caps, to move from one side of the scrum to the other. But it looks like it's working so far.
Yeah, nothing would surprise me with Cian Healy. I think I was in Irish squads with him back right to 2007 when he was training with Ireland before the 2007 World Cup, And I just remember being in awe of the physicality, the hardness and the kind of durability of this guy at such a young age. And he's obviously gone on to have a fantastic career. Very unlucky in 2013 with the Lions tour when he got selected and got injured. I think at that stage he was probably right up at the top of the charts for as a loose head prop in World Rugby. And he's been a brilliant player for Leinster and Ireland over the years. So it doesn't surprise me. It kind of went under the radar this one, Jared, didn't it? We didn't hear a lot about it. But for him to move over now is a little bit surprising, in a sense that obviously when Leo Cullen spoke about it last week or the week before, that the reasons to try and get more depth at tight heads. And I just thought he came on yesterday, one of the first scrum he had. He gets a penalty. Leinster march the Dragons backwards. Right, okay, you got to look at the quality of opposition. Can he do that for Ireland if he comes on or starts as a tight head? But he's the kind of fella that, if you know what I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he'd be willing to do this and would be able to make a fist of it, because there is a big difference from going to loose head to tight head. In my time at Munster, I think Peter Clohessy was a tight head. He went to loose head to try and facilitate John Hayes being a tight head, who was in a transition from kind of second row. And I played trying to play a good bit of club rugby with Shannon, my club at the time. And the idea was to try and get him to, get him on the field and get Claw on the field as well. But Claw, I remember asking Claw what it was like several times. And he said, look, it's tight head is way harder. For him going over as a loose head was a bit of an armchair ride, because you're only scrummaging against one guy there as opposed to two guys. But just the brute strength of Cian Healy will obviously make a big difference. But there's a technical ability to being a tight head as well. And I just think it's incredible to see it, and it wouldn't surprise me if he makes it work.
Well, is it possible that it prolongs his career by a couple of years? Because you expect that your loose head to be full of energy and full of running and maybe a bit of a ball carrier if all is going well. And that's probably a stage of Cian Healy's career where that bit of his career is winding down. But if he's coming on for 20-25 minutes to be a totally acceptable international quality tight head, then he could actually play another 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, for sure. And he's such a freak of nature as regards the conditioning and the strength and the power that he has. And it's up to himself, obviously, the way he looks after himself and wants to keep going. But for him to move over tight head, as I said, I think he could make a real fist and go of this. Tyke Furlong obviously has bucked the trend in recent years about footballing ability of tight heads and ball carrying and passing and all that stuff. It's the full package there with Furlong, and it's proven. He's world class. But for any coach, one of the most important positions on the field is the tight head. Probably the most important, because you just want to make sure that you get your scrum right. You can't win games if your scrum is going backwards, and it's a vital situation. So it's definitely an option of prolonging his career here. But we've got to see more of it, Jerry. You can't just do it against the Dragons away and do it in some URC games. It's probably when it steps up to European level and international level, can he do it there? And as I said, it wouldn't surprise me if he can, but it would give him an option of probably prolonging the career a bit, because it's very true what you say. We expect loose heads to be dynamic and carrying the ball a lot and being around the field a lot more. And this is an option for him that may prolong his career.
Dan Levy's back, and that's a great thing. What level of expectation should we have around him?
They're probably the only 2 positives from that performance yesterday, and maybe the win. Look, they won, but Leinster were, after having so much possession and pressure on the Dragons in the first half, they were down to 13 men. It was a really poor performance, I think. Surprising. I've been to Rodney Parade over the years against the Dragons, and back when they were Newport, and it can be tricky when the crowd get behind them and a few refereeing decisions go against you. Mistakes start to happen, but I was surprised with Leinster how poor they were at times yesterday, and continuously just turning the ball over, knocking the ball on, realignments. again, there's some mitigation there, like we said about the Munster performance. It's early days, and Leinster a big scalp for everyone. Munster a big scalp for everyone. So you're playing against teams who really raised their game, and the Dragons did that. They have, even though they have a small Welsh contingent, they have Wainwright and Moriarty in the back row who are really, really good players. But it was a really poor performance from Leinster. But I just thought when I saw Dan Levy coming on the field, I said that's a positive. It's game time. It's kind of like RG Snyman coming back. It's that type of player who can impact and change things massively. He left to wait his turn to get back in as a 7 because Josh van der Fleer was superb. He was brilliant, and I think his performance, there's an energy and an aggression that seems to have changed a little bit. Whether that's coming from the Irish coaches or Leinster coaches about being more aggressive and more dynamic in his carries. He was really good yesterday, but having Levy back and the thoughts of a fit Dan Levy, whether he'll ever get back to what we saw a number of years ago from him before the horrendous injury, who knows? But getting him back in the field is a big plus for Leinster, and Max Deegan. Loads of depth for them in that back row.
Not a bad weekend for Ulster either, and not just with regards to their results. Dan McFarland was pretty excited by the performance of Dwayne Vermeulen as well against the All Blacks at the weekend, and I guess everybody's looking forward to seeing him playing in the URC and the Champions Cup over the next little while.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's not. That was an incredible game on Saturday. South Africa winning in the end. Vermeulen looks like he's kind of back up to speed, and for him getting him to Ulster is, it's the here and now, as I said a while back when the signing was announced. If he can bring that level of performance, there'll be a lot of weight and expectation on his shoulders, and if he has a bad game, there'll be a lot of groaning and moaning and questions about it. But he's a top quality player who can bring power and aggression and ball carrying ability to an Ulster side that really need it. Lots of question marks in the last number of years about that finished product, that aggression, that ball carrying ability, and he brings all of that.
Barbalaza on YouTube says the Springboks were superb on Saturday. They kicked less than New Zealand. They went wide. They offloaded. Let's have some credit where credit is due. I didn't see the game, but by all accounts, it was a bit of a classic. It was, yeah. And I tell you, if I was thinking this after the game, and I saw some stuff online that there was a lot of criticism, I suppose, from the public about the Lions South Africans games, which were justified. They were terrible to watch, but you just think that if South Africa can use their attacking game more, they're the full package, because it was incredible. The hands, Lucanu, the pass for the little flick around the back for Damien Diolande for the first try. Mapimpi, ball carrying ability, and there's no Chelson Colby there at the moment. Pollard can pass, he can take it flat to the line. Diolande is a good footballer as well, Willie Leroux. So they have incredible attacking threats, and I just thought that's what they brought on Saturday, and maybe it stunned the All Blacks a little bit. They brought great attack to their game as well, and it was a superb game. It was a brilliant game, and they finished on a high. I think there was question marks about the Springboks a few weeks ago when they lost those two games to Australia, but they just have an ability against New Zealand. It went close the week before, it was 1917. They can just get amongst them, and they have a confidence and a belief, this group now, that can beat them nearly every time they play them. Fair enough. I'm delighted for them. Best team in the world. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million.